Welcome to A Call to Action, a series presented by Great Eastern Radio and Brattleboro Community Television. We're covering many different topics from recovery initiatives to safeguarding your Zoom meetings. Today, we're talking with Chris Campany. He's the Executive Director for the Windham Regional Commission. I'm Peter Fish-Case. Chris, welcome to A Call to Action.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So, for those not familiar with what the Windham Regional Commission does, can you take a moment to explain exactly? Because I mean, there's kind of a wide breadth of ground that you cover. So, if you could take a moment just to explain what it is you do exactly.
Sure. So our mission is to assist towns in Southeast Vermont with effective local governance and working collaboratively with them on issues of regional importance. In the absence of county government, the state's 11 regional planning commissions serve as an essential link between local, state, and federal government. So we actually don't have the authority to do anything. We have no billing or taxation. We have no taxation authority. We're primarily funded through performance-based grants, but we are a political subdivision of the state. And so the commission is actually composed of commissioners who are appointed by the town select boards, and they're the ones who direct the commission. We work on a variety of areas, including emergency planning, transportation, energy planning, natural resource and water quality planning, community development. We have a brownfields revolving loan fund through which we provide funding to help remediate and investigate sites either have hazardous or petroleum contamination or might possibly have it. And so projects that have used that funding would include Red Clover Common and New England Youth Theater and a number of properties up in Bellows Falls, really all around the region. And the region consists of all 23 towns in Windham County, and Reedsboro, Searsburg, and Windhall, and Bennington County, and Weston and Windsor County. And the commission was established in 1965.
Okay, so it's 55 years old. All right.
Yep.
I had no idea. I've known of the Windham Regional Commission. I did not realize that it was around that long though. So that's interesting. And you cover all the folks in Searsburg?
Yes.
All three of them?
Well, Somerset's the smaller one. There are a few more in Searsburg.
Okay.
Somerset, I think, still has a population of 2 or 3, right?
Yeah, it's just, which been social distancing forever. All right. Now, before we dive into coronavirus, can you give us some examples of what the Regional Commission has dealt with in your tenure?
Yeah, I came on in 2010, and so almost a little more than a year. So I came on kind of at the depths of the impacts of the Great Recession, and then about a year after I came on, we had Irene, and that was really a pivotal moment, not only for Windham Regional Commission, but all the regional commissions, because that role, that link between local, state, and federal government really gelled, because the state was so overwhelmed with taking care of its own infrastructure. The regional commissions were tasked with really providing the direct lead between the towns and FEMA to help mitigate any issues they might have as towns tried to rebuild. And then we also, through that, developed we actually have a role in the state emergency response. We serve as local liaisons between the municipalities and the State Emergency Operations Center. And so when there's a disaster, including this one, we will not only do we help towns report information up and make sure their needs are communicated, but we also help staff the State Emergency Operations Center. We provide bench depth to them. And that's not just us, that's all the regional commissions. Of course, we were involved in helping to plan around both anticipating the eventual Vermont Yankee closure and what those economic impacts were going to look like whenever it would close for whatever reason. We weren't advocating for it to close, but we knew that if it ever did, for whatever reason, is going to have major economic and fiscal impacts. And so we were planned ahead of that and then helped with the response after the closure. And we have a seat on the Nuclear Decommissioning Systems Advisory Panel. We also work on a number of large transportation projects. One of the projects that we helped have a big hand in was the replacement of the interstate bridge over Route 30 in the West River. We advocated that needed to be a gateway bridge, not just another interstate bridge, and so that's why it's become actually like a visitor stopping point that it is. We want it to be a gateway to and from the Route 30 West River Valley. Now, most recently, in addition to the COVID response, just this week, we completed a feasibility study to serve the unserved and underserved people without broadband for the region as a whole. And what will follow on the heels of that will be the development of a business plan for a regional communications union district, which has already been formed in the Deerfield Valley, and that will serve as a communications union district for all 27 towns, plus possibly some others in Bennington County too.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's an important initiative, I know, to kind of keeping Southern Vermont vital. So that is good. Now, has the whole COVID-19 disrupted your day-to-day operations at the commission?
Well, we're all working remote. We began working remote starting March 23rd. Where it's impacted us the most is the work of a regional commission is inherently involves engaging with the public. That's a big part of what we do, is help facilitate conversations within towns, between towns, with the general public about that whole range of issues that I was talking to you about, from community development, emergency planning, transportation, you name it, a lot of big issues. And that's a challenge, especially in a region where we do have so many weak areas as far as broadband and even cell phone communication is concerned. And then just the everybody getting used to using the technology so far is not a satisfactory replacement for really robust public engagement, especially when you're talking about land use and how and land use policy and that kind of thing. It's just not as easy to have that give and take. In other respects, it's made things. The flip side of that, one of the things you'll find with planners is we're always looking at both sides of everything. So one of the things one of the areas where we have benefited actually is there are some people who more easily participate by remote means, and so the idea is going forward, how do we adapt to where you make the best possible use of the remote participation, even while we eventually return back to the face-to-face discussions about a whole range of policy issues.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that is. I think now, as we're a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on when everybody started, and then that's a little bit of a moving target. I think that we've all kind of adapted to this new norm fairly quickly, under the guise of it takes 21 days to create a habit. And then how will we go back to our old muscle memory, which I think will fall into place. Now, all right, let's get right into the crux of the coronavirus and pass. You mentioned Irene. Are there any things that you can take from Irene and bring forward into your COVID protocols, and as far as operating, have there been anything that the Windham Regional Commission has been able to say, well, that's good because we did this back during Irene, so we can bring this forward and deploy this?
Well, the first thing we actually jumped on was continuity of operations planning for municipalities, just trying to help set the stage for what they were going to need to do. Before I came on, I think it was for the H1N1 virus. There have been so many.
Yeah.
The state had actually, and FEMA had actually asked states to work with municipalities to develop continuity of operations plans in the event H1N1 really blew up. So we knew that we needed to get information out. So we actually pulled out those templates, got those to towns. We have direct contact information for lots of town officials. And so we got all that information directly to the local Department of Health and Agency of Human Services districts so they could communicate directly with the municipalities. Then we knew that there were going to be public open meeting laws issues, especially the requirement that you have a physical location required and that people be staff that. So we worked with VLCT and the legislature, and Senator Jeanette White was great. She she led a lot of the discussion through the Senate Government Operations Committee, working on how towns can continue to actually conduct regular business, because they have to keep paying, making payroll and doing everything else that they normally do throughout all this. And then another piece of that were all the deadlines that municipalities have to meet. We worked with VLCT and the legislature to get extensions on all those deadlines, giving the legislature the authority to just give blanket deadlines for extensions beyond the end of the state of emergency, and then giving the governor the ability in the areas that he controls to offer extensions on various things. But now, one of the things, and you're involved in this and really appreciate it, is one of the things that we learned after Irene was the long-term recovery, how that works. So just so folk know, it's usually when a disaster happens, right, it's typically a flood or something. And if enough people are displaced from their homes, FEMA will come in with some assistance to get people back into housing and like replace household goods and clothes. That's like $35,000 max. And then if you get any other funding after that, you have to pay some of that money back. But that's it. So when it comes to long-term recovery, this isn't just for Vermont, this is nationwide. Mm-hmm. So say in Mississippi, a tornado comes through and wipes out a town. FEMA will come in with that initial response, but the long-term recovery is left to the community itself. And so what happened after Irene, we had a number of people lost their homes or displaced from their homes. And so United Way of Windham County and other groups, SEVCA and other groups, stood up a long-term recovery committee and established caseworkers to actually work with individuals to help them get back into their homes, making use of various state and federal programs. It was a really complicated application process. So now what we're looking at is what are going to be the long-term recovery needs for the pandemic, which is a very different type of event. It's going to be an extraordinarily long-run event. And we don't exactly know what that long-term recovery looks like because we're still in response mode, right? You think about response and recovery. So one of the great things that's happened is Sue Graff, the local district, AOC of Human Services District, has helped form a group of a number of different human service agencies and community response organizations, and with Windham Regional Commission and Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, to create a network so that we can talk to each other, communicate with each other, share what we're learning about what issues are and what the resource needs are going to be, and potential resource opportunities, so that we can develop that long-term response capacity. So that's just meeting, and it does cover the region as a whole, that 27-town Southeast Vermont region that I mentioned earlier. But I'm really glad that we're already standing that up. And there are a number of people. It's great to have both a number of people who have the past Irene experience and that long-term recovery experience, but then we've got a lot of new people too. And it's so yeah, you don't want to see a disaster like this happen, but it's great to see the resources and energy and frankly commitment of people to their neighbors in the region.
Right. So when in your, I guess in your geographical drop, you've got a town, Brattleboro, that has over 12,000 citizens, and then you've got Somerset with 3, right? So I mean, obviously there's going to be more pull towards the Brattleboro area as there is towards the Somerset area. Although everybody's fair and equal in this particular fight, but I mean, how do you balance that, especially during a time like this?
That's our main role. Is we try to adapt what we do as a regional commission to serve each town as it's needed on its own terms. So Brattleboro, of course, has capacity, and Rockingham as well, and Wilmington to some extent. They have capacities that other communities don't. Other communities, have extraordinarily limited capacity. One of the things that in non-emergency times that we do is there are a number of organizations that exist out there in the world to serve the needs of people who live in towns, and everybody lives in a town. But one of the big questions we'll always get is like, why are the towns doing this, or why aren't the towns doing that? Well, some communities, like Brattleboro, they offer a whole range of services. Other towns, though, really, the select board functions to help develop a budget and implement a budget, and a lot of that, goes to roads.
Right.
But otherwise, they don't have a lot of capacity. They maybe not even have a full-time staff person other than the road foreman. And so we'll help. Oftentimes, we serve as like that extension of their administrative capacity to get work done that they need to get done. But the other thing that we do is this is why we try to keep an eye on, not to be nosy, but just keep an eye on what's happening all over the place, so that if we see that an area is under-resourced, we'll reach out to the state or service organizations or other groups to say, hey, we're hearing through like the emergency management directors. We host meetings of the regions, each town's emergency management director on a quarterly basis. We have close relationships with those people. We can communicate with them regularly. Right now, we're hosting a weekly meeting with them and other town officials and the local Vermont Emergency Management, Department of Health, and Agency of Human Services staff. So even through that, they can hear from each other and share information. But as we become aware of what the issues are, then we can reach out to others to try to help get resources to where they need to go. And this hasn't happened that much on this event, but sometimes we can help. We don't necessarily staff it, but we can come in and like a community organizer function and help a community stand up something that maybe they need that they don't currently have.
So during something like this, safe to say a town like Somerset might see more of the Windham Regional Commission than a town like Brattleboro.
Yeah, Somerset, because there is so few people, they actually have a governor-appointed town supervisor who I know is in close contact with those residents there. I would say it's bigger than the Somersets in terms of population. It's more, especially through the emergency management directors. It's the Londonderrys and the Reedsboroughs and the Newfanes and those towns. And the other thing that we're working with them on, and this is a little different, but it's helping guide them through the state of emergency in a different order. So because we do work on a number of transportation projects, and we actually do some direct transportation work in towns, like it's even helping the road foreman understand what does this order mean now for regular road maintenance issues. Or we've got one of the questions that we just got this week was in Jamaica, they approved, they chose a contractor to do a paving project. Well, what do those orders say now about out-of-state contractors coming in to do that work? What does that mean? And so we can run those questions up the line to the state and help them get the answers to it. And we also work a lot with VLCT. We're both VLCT, we have different functions, but VLCT is great because they have that legal expertise. We have a lot of professional expertise and just general knowledge, but they've got that legal expertise. And so we can also reach out to VLCT and say, these are questions that we're hearing, are you guys hearing that too? And then we can get that information back out to towns, or give VLCT and the legislature a heads up about things we're hearing that they may not be aware of. Okay.
Let's talk about, we've mentioned and we've touched on recovery a little bit. And again, I get that the systems we put into place today will look much different tomorrow. We're all trying to fix the car as it's moving. Nobody pandemics well. All the things I've been throwing out there on all my interviews. But what right now, as of today, what do the long-term recovery plans look like as far as the Windham Regional Commission is concerned?
So a few areas, right? There's economic recovery, and we collaborate with Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation on those issues. Towns may want to be applying for grants. We can help provide assistance with that. Oftentimes, it's not necessarily the direct grant writing, but it's giving them the information, like the demographic information, the maps, and other things that they need to develop the applications. We're going to have the ongoing situational awareness identification where we'll be reaching out to the EMDs, because we're going to have, depending on how long we've got the shelter in place and then just the aftermath, we're going to need to keep identifying what the issues are, because generally speaking, a disaster where you've already had problems, those problems are going to be exacerbated. where you already have those issues, they're going to be amplified. It's and again, this planner thing about looking at both sides of the coin. It's also an opportunity for people to come together maybe in ways they hadn't previously, and we saw that after Irene. But it's some of the issues we don't necessarily know what they're going to be. But one that I think we're already beginning to see is we've been giving folk towns a heads up about on the land use planning side of things about at some point, Southeast Vermont especially should look at population growth and land use pressures that maybe we hadn't seen before. And I suspect that not only Vermont, but a lot of rural and what we call exurban New England and the Northeast are going to see a lot of development pressures as people move out of the more densely populated areas into other parts, especially now that we're getting used to working remote now for months. That's going to become more commonplace. So, anecdotally, we're already hearing about purchasing of residential property sight unseen by folk who want to move up, and that's going to be a great opportunity because we need to increase our working age population. And those are also people who can help invest in broadband and make broadband more viable. And other community development projects, but it's also going to create new pressures. It'll create upward pressure on housing values. It could exacerbate our housing shortage. It could put pressures on land values if people actually start looking at developing subdivisions again. So that could put pressure on farmland values and stress, make it difficult, especially for intergenerational transfer of farms from one person to another. So one of the things we're going to be reaching out to towns about, we've done this earlier, actually even last year, just asking towns, look at what your town plans say, and do the policies actually get you to where you say you want to be in the future? And we're going to be reaching out to them again. It is a hard time for them to be working on plans because, again, you don't have that normal social interaction that we're typically able to have as far as community outreach. But we want to reach out to them to kind of help them think it through, stress testing their plans. Like, typically in the beginning of the plan, it says we want to concentrate growth in and around our villages and downtowns. We want to preserve the countryside for farming and working forests. So now you got to look at the policies to see, do they actually accomplish that, or are there holes in there that are so big that it's just going to allow relatively unfettered development, within the context of Act 250 throughout the town as a whole? Because the path of least resistance right now really is on this large lot development on Class 3 town roads. And then the issue there is, because I've lived this in other parts of the country where I've lived, is then the burden for towns is the pressure to have infrastructure chase where the development goes, as opposed to where it actually is. And if you look at our form of governance, that's going to be distributed across 27 different towns. And not every town necessarily has the capacity to respond to that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. I want to let you get back to work here today, but I do have one question for you. The overall prognosis for you, and I get it. If you were to ask me, just in layman's terms, when does this thing end? And I'm going to use the word vaccine. And I think that's what's going to restore our confidence. That's what's going to restore consumer confidence. It's going to, once we have an absolute cure for this thing. But overall prognosis for this whole thing, Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
If you mean the overall impacts, at some level, just in where I sit, we were still recovering from the Great Recession. Vermont didn't necessarily have a huge peak and trough in terms of house values and other things that other parts of the country did, but we were already struggling with relatively low incomes and people having to work multiple jobs. So now this is a disaster, a very slow moving one, coupled with the economic impacts that are only now unfolding, right? We'll have to see what that looks like. But I'm not trying to be pessimistic at all, but I think it's going to be, probably a decade at least that we're going to be having to work to, really not just rebuild the local economy. When I think about the local economy, I think about not just how businesses are doing, but household income security. In other words, how to feed people when they come home at night. Are they fretting over their bills, and are they worrying? Or are they feeling like, okay, I've got a job the next day, I've got income, things are generally secure. At least that part of my life I can exhale about.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the big challenge. And then we'll just need to watch, if the region does see more development pressure. Because if you think about it, we've got, passenger rail, we've got interstate. We're going to be a pretty attractive area for, we're pretty close to a lot of metro areas in the Northeast. We're going to need to really keep an eye out on inequities and make sure that if the benefits to that development actually help benefit the population as a whole. And that's you don't want a situation where some ships are rising very quickly and otherwise people are getting underwater and the other folk are getting underwater.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the long-term issue that we're going to have to deal with.
Okay. Great. Chris, thank you for the conversation today. Shed a light on a lot of different things, and we appreciate you taking the time with us here on A Call to Action today.
Thank you, sir.